Good morning, everyone. Hope y'all are all doing well. It is, what day is it? It is Sunday, June 19th. It's 6:45 in the morning. And I figured today we could build out a nice little Slack bot. Some of my most popular videos on my channel from years ago were getting started with the Slack APIs. And so since then, those APIs have changed pretty drastically, and the old code I had no longer works. So I figured this morning I'd go ahead and make a video and basically update that process. So what are we going to build today? What's it going to look like? We are going to build a small little Python server. We're rolling in Python today. This server is going to subscribe to the Slack event API. So whenever Slack notices something, for lack of a better term, it will push an event to this server. This server will take a look at that event, decide how to respond, and then use the Slack web APIs to tell Slack to do one thing or another. And so by way of an example of what we're going to build, if I come over to my Slack playground over here and just say, hey, Slack starter, are you there? My bot will come back and say, I heard my name. If I say, hey, Slack starter 2022, do you want to hear a secret? It'll actually send me a private message. And so here it'll say, I would love to hear a secret, but we should talk in a private channel. So then I can tell it, I love to code. And it'll come back and say, I love sending messages, right? So everything works as one might suspect. Bot is up and running. And so how are we going to build this? Well, in order to build this, we are going to need a handful of tools. First one is going to be a Python IDE of choice with all of the Python goodies installed on our local machine. That would be something like actual Python, Python virtual environments if you want to use it, so on and so forth. In the event you are unfamiliar with how to do any of that, I've got this Mac developer setup where if you're running on Intel, I actually have some older videos that walk you through this, but they're all just as relevant. And then if you are running on an M1 chip, I'll walk you through that as well. So I've got some notes down here on how to install Python, all that sort of good stuff. So if you need that, it's here. I'll link it in the description down below. So let's go ahead and get building. One more thing that we're going to need. So the way this is going to operate is Slack is actually going to be sending events to our server. Our server is going to be running locally. We're not actually going to deploy it anywhere today. And so as such, we need something that is going to expose our local server to the big bad internet. This is something that's okay for development, but isn't something I'd advise day to day unless you are going to have a significant amount of security in your A network and B on your machine. But for developmental purposes, this will be okay. So the tool I like to use is called Ngrok. The website looks like this, and again, I'll link this below. Free utility. You can either download binaries themselves and put them on your local, or if you have Homebrew installed, which I would certainly advise, and in the event you don't have Homebrew installed, it's actually in my developer setup of how to do so. But then you can just go brew install Ngrok and it'll pull down the right version. It supports Intel and M1 both, so assuming you're running on a Mac, you should be good to go. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So as far as my dummy project goes, we don't need that open. We are going to be building from scratch, same way we did the Java projects. We'll go ahead and turn off Ngrok. Right, and we'll just get after it. So first things first, I've actually already made me a directory here, but we're gonna start with this Slackbot tutorial directory, nice and empty. We will open up actually, first things first, let's make us a Python environment inside of our tutorial space. And that is going to be what, Pyenv, I think, or is it Python? I believe it is Python-m. Yeah, there we go. Venv environment. This will create us a nice little Python virtual environment. So in the event we clobber something with dependencies, we can just blow it away and start over. Then we'll go source, environment, then activate, and then this will grab our environment. All right, next step is we are going to go ahead and open up our project. So that's going to live here, Slackbot tutorial, press to open. We don't need any of that. And we don't need any of that. All right, let's go ahead and pick our interpreter of choice. So I'm going to hit Command, comma. That's going to open up my preferences pane. We are going to go down to project, Slackbot tutorial. We are going to select Python interpreter. I don't necessarily want to use the default one that my IDE gave me, so we're going to add my own. And we are going to pull the version of Python that we created from the virtual environment. So under Slackbot tutorial, under environment, under bin, we're going to have Python 3.1.0. That is what we want. So we're going to hit OK, 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 OK. So now we actually have our environment set up. So next things next, we are going to go ahead and create our app.py. So let's go ahead and go Python file. We are going to call this something super creative like app.py. This is what is going to serve as our server that all our code is going to be running in. So I figure we'll go ahead and get a dummy Flask server up and running, and then we'll actually go do the Slackbot pieces. So first things first, we need our main method and all that sort of good stuff. So if the Python is still floating around in my head, it should be if name equals something like underscore main, and then we need a colon, and then it is going to be app.run, and we need to list our host, which is just going to be local, so 0.0.0.0, and then we need a port, which we're just going to default to 3000, and we're going to say use reloader equals false, big F, and then we need threaded. We're just going to say true for now. All right, and then in order to actually run this app, we need to go app equals Flask underscore name, and then we need from Flask import Flask. We are also going to need JSONify and request. Okay, so this is all well and good and complaining about everything. That is because we don't have Flask installed. So let's go ahead and knock that out. And so just by way of versions, my Python version is 3.10.4, and then we're just going to go pip install Flask. And this grabbed us, 212. So we should have Flask. Those lines should go away. Everything should be nice and happy. And then if I go ahead and run app, we should get a nice little server running. We don't have any endpoints exposed, so not a whole lot's going on just yet. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we'll make a nice little health check route. So app.route. Let's go ahead and build out health check. This will just be a get. We'll call this method health check. And then whenever, nope, that's Java. There we go. And then whenever we call this, we will return JSONify, and then this will have something to the effect of like health, and we will say server is up and running. Okay, there we go. And that should cover a basic endpoint. So if we then start our server up, port 3000 is being used by another process. That's odd. What the hell is running that's using port 3000? Alright, well, that's no big deal. Here, how about port 4000 today? Mix it up. Alright. Run. Server boots up. And then if we pull up something like Postman, we should be able to go local host : 4000 health, what do we call it? Health check with a dash. And we should get back servers up and running. So now we have our nice little Flask server. Alright, so next things next is we actually need to go create a Slack bot via Slack and install it into our workspace. So let's tackle that. Alright, so if we go to Slack's webpage, let's just like Google Slack bot. Enabling interactions with Slack, that'll work. Let's go to our apps, create new app, perfect. We are going to, and I'll put a link to this in the description as well, just for documentation purposes. We are going to go from scratch. We are going to call this Slack bot tutorial. And we are going to put this in the coffee code and creatine space, and we're just going to go ahead and create the app. Okay, so now we have Slack bot tutorial, and we need to start enabling a handful of things. So first things first, we need to come down to, let's see, probably OAuth and permissions. We need to install this into our workspace, but before we can do that, we need to add permissions. And so that I want to say, you need at least one permission scope. Where did permissions belong? Probably under app home. Yeah. Review scopes and add scopes. Okay. So add an Oauth scope. For this, we are going to need a few things. Those things are going to be app mentions, chat write, instant message write in history, and then incoming webhook. So we're going to go ahead and add all those in. So app message read, we're going to want that. We are going to want chat write. We are going to want chat read. Actually, nope, I lied. I'm sorry. IM history is what we're going to want. And then we're going to want write. And then we are going to want incoming webhook. So what this is going to allow us to do is get information whenever there's an app mention. We are going to be able to send messages in public channels. We are going to be able to see history. For direct messages, we're going to be able to write direct messages, and then we're going to get notifications of like incoming webhooks. So nothing too crazy there. Then we are now going to install this into our workspace. We are going to plop this in our bot playground channel. We're going to say allow. Okay, so far so good. And now we are going to get this bot user OAuth token. This is going to be part of the authentication piece. We are going to need this. So we're just going to copy this for the time being, and we're going to stick this over here. So we are going to call this just token for now. And we're going to store that in this string. Okay. Next thing we're going to need to do, we got the OAuth stuff. We did mention that Slack is going to be streaming events to our server, so we need to enable event subscriptions. So what we're going to do, and we're not going to turn this on yet, because whenever we enable events, the first thing that Slack is going to try and do is it's going to send a event to our server. This event is going to have some security wrapped around it, and we basically need to be able to say, yep, this came from Slack, we know it is secure, and then we are going to respond in a certain way. And that's not easy. That's going to actually take a little bit of code. Basically, all we're going to do is, if you are familiar with things like either checksums or client signatures, we are going to be sent a payload, we are going to be sent a string that's garbled up in some type of way, and we are going to use public information to garble up the payload and check it against the string. In the event those two things are the same, we know the payload is safe, we can respond saying, yep, we know it's safe, and then off to the races we go. So, before we enable this, we're going to go ahead and just knock that out and get the auth piece out of the way. So, actually, you know what, just for fun, let's go ahead and just turn this on real quick. Right, so the request URL is going to be where it does the verify, and then these are the events we can subscribe to. I might actually be able to subscribe to the events that we need and then handle the auth part. So, app mention we want, and then we want message IM. Where is message IM? Groups, files, pins, users, emojis, team, channel. Yeah. Did I miss it? Can we search for it? Love me. Message IM. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, we won't be able to save it until we do that. That's okay. All right, let's go ahead and get this knocked out. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to expose out an endpoint. It's going to consume these events that get pushed to us. Okay, so app.route. We are going to call this something super creative, like event consumer. And this needs to be, there we go, methods, this needs to be a post. And I think that's all we need there, and then we're going to create our method. We'll just call it consume event. We don't need anything passed in. And then this is how this will largely is going to work. So the way I would set this up is I would say if message secure, and then we need to pass in the request itself. We can actually do some work. So for example, let's just go print log message is secure, right? Else print log message is not secure, right? In the event the message is secure, we actually need to respond with the challenge. And so all that means is inside of the payload that gets sent to us, it's going to have a challenge string. We have to send that back. So we can say something to the effect of return JSONify. We need to set up a payload, right? This is going to be challenge, CHALLNGE. I think I spelled that right. Challenge is one of those words that for whatever reason I can never spell correctly. And then we are going to grab the request. We need to say get JSON, right? And then we just need to pull the challenge out. So get challenge. Okay, I think I spelled that right. Cool. So in the event our message is secure, we're returning with the challenge. In the event our message is not secure, we'll just respond with nothing, right? Challenge, and I guess we can just respond with like none, right? And just so by way of the way this project is going to be built out, here is where we do work, right? And so the next thing we need to do is build out this message secure method. What does that mean? All right, so down here, we're going to have message secure, and we are going to pass in a request. Whoops. Okay. And so what we're going to do here is go ahead and validate our payload against the signature. So we're going to need to pull a few things out from the payload, compute our Hmac, verify our signatures, and off to the races we go. So first, let's go ahead and grab our request body. Right, this is just going to be the JSON that gets passed in the request. So we're going to go request, get JSON. All right, nothing too fancy here. And then we're going to need to pull out a request timestamp. So timestamp is equal to request.headers.get, and we need to get a header called x Slack request timestamp. Okay, so now we have our timestamp. Just for giggles, let's go ahead and print these out. Also, today is all about Slack bots, not necessarily building Slack web servers. In a perfect world, you would have a logger. I'm just running with print statements for brevity and simplicity. All right, so let's go ahead and print out our request body. This is going to be something to the effect of string request body, and then we will go ahead and print out our timestamp. Right, timestamp, and we'll go string timestamp. All right, so now at least we'll be able to see the data that we are working with. And then from this point, so the first piece of checking that Slack advises you do in order to verify these URLs is quickly validate request origin, one tab over, I guess. Nope, I lied. All right, let's come back right here. Validate request origin. They give you some notes on how you can do this. And I'm not going to go so far as to say Slack's documentation is terrible, but it makes a lot of assumptions at times. It's a little out of date, and it can be really clunky to work with. So for example, here they reference an absolute value, which isn't a method in the version of Python I'm using. They also say concatenate version number v naught, the timestamp in the request body, but if you look at this request body, it's not standard JSON as like you might suspect. So if you ran dumps on your payload, this isn't going to work. And then they have an Hmac compute hash SHA-256, which is an older method, right? So you could go through this and see if you could get their documentation to work as advertised. I wasn't able to do so. But the way that you are supposed to check to make sure this is secure is step one is you make sure your timestamp is in within 5 minutes, so somebody's not trying to do a reply attack, and then you compute the hash and you verify it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, code this up, but there's your documentation. Okay, so first things first, we're going to do if abs, so absolute value time. We'll need to go import time, but we'll take care of that in a second. Minus float of timestamp is, let's say, yep, so absolute value of that is greater than 60 times 5. We are not good, so we will say print log timestamp outside of range, likely in attack, right? And in this case, we want to basically return false, right? Not secure. We are not happy. So return false. Not Flask. I'm sorry. False. All right, so let's go ahead and import time real quick, as well as some other dependencies we may need. So we have Flask. We are going to import time. We're also going to be working with JSON, so let's go ahead and import that in. Right, JSON, we are also going to be working with Hmac to compute these secrets, so let's go ahead and grab that. We are also going to need hashlib. That just goes along with the Hmac part. And then we are going to be making some requests to the Slack web API. So we're going to go ahead and pull those in as well. Except we don't have that installed, so let's go ahead and take care of that real quick. Nope. Pip install requests. And then we should be good to go. Perfect. All right. Let's go back to our auth method. All right, message secure. And we are at this point in time. So we checked our timestamp. We should be good to go there. Now we need to make our signature base string as it's referred to in the docs. So let's go sig base string equals, this is going to be v0 semicolon plus timestamp plus, and then another semicolon plus, and then we need basically our payload as a string decoded in UTF-8. So we're going to go request.get data, not JSON, because we want a string. Then we're going to go decode UTF-8. That should get us what we need. And then we can go ahead and print this out just for, the case of logging and seeing what we have. So we'll say log sig base string, and this will be sig base string. Okay, moving right along. So now in order to compute our Hmac, we need both our key and our message as a byte array. So now we're going to go ahead and compute that. So we are going to say our key as bytes is equal to a byte array. And then we are going to go key bytes dot extend. And this is something to the effect of, what is it? Map ord. And this is going to be technically our Slack signing secret. We'll go over that in a minute. Our Slack signing secret, and then we'll do the same thing for the message. So let's go ahead and do message bytes byte array message bytes extend map ord, and then this just needs to be our signature base string. And then we will actually do the Hmac computation. We'll go over the Slack signing secret in a bit. For the time being, we'll just make us a string up here to reference the Slack signing secret. Okay, signature base string, why are you upset? There's supposed to be a comma. And you need another parenthesis. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead and actually do the comparison piece. So H equals Hmac dot new, and then we need our key bytes and our message bytes, and then this is going to be hashlib dot, this needs to be SHA-256, right? And then from there, we need to build out my signature. So I signature equals equals, we want v0 0 again, like so. And then we want the hex digest of this Hmac. So we're just going to go h.hex digest. And then that should be our version of the signature computed. And so now we need to pull out the signature Slack sent us. And so that is actually in a header. So we're going to go request.getHeader. No, I'm sorry, it's request.headers.get. And this is going to be called x Slack signature. And now once we have our computed signature and the Slack signature, we need to compare the two. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can go if Hmac dot compare digest, and then we're going to pass in my signature as well as the Slack signature, right? If they're the same, we're going to print out log signatures match, and then we'll return true, else print log signatures do not match, and we'll return false. All right, and then just for, case of logging and understanding, let's go ahead and print out the signatures themselves. So log my signature, we will print out my signature, and we'll do the same thing for the Slack signature. Oops, Slack signature. Okay, there we go. And assuming we didn't fumble that up, this should actually handle the auth part. So kind of comparing to the documentation here, they tell you to save your signing secret. They pull the JSON from the body. They check the timestamp. They build the base string. They compute the hash. And then they verify the hash. So that's exactly what we did. We pull the JSON body. We check the timestamp. We compute the hash. We verify the hash. And so the only other thing we need to come up with is this now Slack signing secret. And the way we get that is we go read our documentation. So it says grab your signing secret, which is under app management updates, which should be under app home. So if we come back to our app screen and we go to our app home, we should have I expected to see a signing secret. Maybe it's under basic information. It's under basic information. So we have a signing secret. We'll show this. We'll copy this. And we'll paste it here. So that should take care of that piece. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and enable these. I must have another Python process running on port 3000 that this somehow managed to validate against. I must have the prior project running, but we won't necessarily worry about that. So we're going to go ahead and click on my little tutorial project here and get this running. All right, so this is running on port 4000. Then what we need to do is turn on Ngrok on port 4000. Right, so that we can expose the project out. We will grab this URL. Oh no, this is Slack starter. That's why. Okay, we need to go to Slackbot tutorial. Oh, that also means we need to update our signing secret. Son of a bitch. Alright, alright, y'all caught that right. We were actually in the wrong Slack project. So let's grab the correct signing secret. Boink. Alright, while we're at it, let's actually make sure we have the right token. Where is that? I think that's under app home. No, it's under Oauth and permissions. Alright, so this ends in DSQX. Alright, that looks okay. So let's go to our event subscription. Let's turn this on. let's grab our Ngrok URL. This is what exposes our project to the world. And then we're going to need to add in event consumer at the end of this, /event consumer. And let's see. Our project responded with an HTTP error. 502 bad gateway. That's because my project is not running. All right, so we start up our project. We retry. What did we not do? Okay, signatures do not match. Message is not secure. So we fumbled something up. So let's go ahead and figure out where we goofed up. This is going to be terrible to try to debug. Depending on how long this takes, I may cut the video here and then just report back, but we'll figure it out. So let's make these let's make these just single characters. So this should be request get data decode UTF-8. That should be all right. We should be creating our key bytes with a base array. We should be extending those. It should be extend, right, map or D. Let's see. Needs to be select signing secret. That should be our base lib. I think I see the problem. The only reason I know this off the top of my head is I spent way too much time trying to figure this out yesterday. This needs to be v0 equals. We have v0 semicolon. All right, so let's see if that works for us. And so this is part of coding, debugging stuff and figure out what you did wrong. All right, retry. Hooray, verified. All right, perfect. So signatures match, message is secure. All right. So now that we have the security aspects out of the way, we can actually do the fun part. All right, let's go back to, I guess, Slack maybe. And so we're going to go over a few things. So we no longer need the auth piece, so that's all well and good. But the way this is going to work is we will get events piped in, we will validate, and then this do work here is going to be sending REST calls to Slack itself. And so what this is going to look like is, so over here, I've got a few URLs that I've already pulled from documentation. Staring at documentation isn't the most fun, but we have a chat post message, which what you can use here is, or how you use this is you pass in a channel ID, and then you pass in a postman or a message, right? So text, postman, text channel. And this will actually send messages to the channel itself. And if we use the correct OAuth token, right, that would be associated with the bot itself, we'll see the message come through. This is an old token, so we're just going to zap that, paste our new token. So if we post this, let's go ahead and change our body. We'll say postman test channel tutorial bot. Before we do this, we actually need to install the bot to the channel. So let's go ahead and do that. Slack bot tutorial. Actually, that may already work if the integration is there. So let's press send. False, not in channel. How does one add a bot to a channel? Let's just do it this way. Hey, Slack bot tutorial. And we'll invite them to the channel. There we go. All right, so now if we send this message, right, we get true. Slack bot tutorial, Postman test channel tutorial bot. So that's working, right? Same way. Another API that we are eventually going to be calling is conversations.open. And what conversations.open does is if you pass in a user ID, this will give you a channel ID to where you can send direct messages to that user. So let's go ahead and grab our token again. Headers, there we go. Zap that, right? And then this gets us D03OYV, right? So this will be a channel associated to sending my person or my Slack account a message. So then we'll come over here to this chat.post message. We will send the specific channel, and we also need to update our header. Boink. Let's go get our actual channel ID that we got from our prior call. And we can place that in there, and then this should send me a direct message to me from the bot. So we'll say postman test DM tutorial. Boink. Right? And there's my Slack bot tutorial message. So that's the flow we're basically going to be using. And so if we remember the demo that I gave at the beginning, if we mention the bot in a public channel, it responds with a basic string. If we ask if it wants to see a secret, which is really just on the backend side of things looking for secret in the string, we'll respond with a private message, and then if we send it a private message, it'll just respond back something non-intelligent. There's no NLP, there's no backend intelligence here. This is just Slack APIs and Slack bots today. So let's go ahead and get that going. And so the first thing that I will say before we go too far into this is we need to have a little bit of control flow logic at the beginning of this method whenever we decide what to respond to and how to respond to it. Because the events that we have subscribed to, one is a mention, which is pretty safe. The other is a direct message. So if you send a direct message to the bot, it will see that message come through the channel and respond to it. And then the bot will see its response message come through and then respond to that. And then it will see that and respond to that and respond to that. And so you end up in this infinite loop of the bot always responding to itself. So we're going to need to take care of that. The other thing that we need to take care of is with the way the APIs are structured, you always have to return that challenge. And so if there's no data and it's just a challenge, there's no point to going through the control flow logic and then responding later, right? So at the very beginning, we will have two if statements, effectively. One that says, hey, if this is a URL verification event, don't worry about it. And then if this event comes from our personal bot or any bot, don't worry about it. And then we can actually start thinking about if we want to respond or not. So let's go ahead and just knock out some of this code real quick. So first things first, right? If URL verification, actually, you know what, before we go too far, let's go ahead and get our payload. So we'll go payload equals request.getJSON, right? And then we'll go if URL verification. I've been writing Java code too long. I want to put parentheses everywhere. If URL verification equals payload.get type, right? We'll go ahead and return JSONify, and this needs to be, actually, you know what, let's just rip this. I don't feel like typing all that back out, especially because I can't ever spell challenge right to save my soul. Okay, so there's URL verification. So this will make sure that in the event we're just checking auth, we don't waste any time or cycles doing other things or risk throwing any type of exception later on down the line. So this is, we'll call it auth check. And then here, we'll have something called not talking to ourself. So what this is going to do is then we need to pull the event out of the payload. So we're going to grab the event. This is going to be payload. What do we call it? No, we just called it payload. I'm sorry, not payload JSON. So payload dot get. How do you spell ourself? I just say self. That's gonna bother me. All right, so we have our event, and then just as a real quick, simple check, we're gonna say if bot ID an event. We're gonna print a log saying we don't want to talk to self, and then we are just going to return the challenge again. We're not gonna send any message back, but we are going to respond to Slack saying, hey, we saw your message, we authenticated, we know it's you, but we elected not to respond. So that's really all we're doing there. And now we can actually start doing doing work that will respond to user messages. So we'll call this respond to user. We no longer need that comment. And so at this point, we need to pull a handful of things outside of our payload. So we're going to go ahead and grab type. So this will just be event.getType. And then we will grab text, right? Event.getText. And then at this point, we might as well print those just for the fun of it. So we'll print log. And this is going to be type, I guess. Cast that to a string. And then we'll go print log. And this is going to be text. And this is going to be our text. Okay. So far, so good. So far, so good. All right. So we have all of our data. And then eventually, as we go down here, we're going to have basically some like if user said hi in channel. This is going to be pseudocodey as hell, but you'll get the point. If user said hi in like public channel, right? We need to check is user telling secret. If they are, private response, else public response, right? And then we can say like if DM respond with DM, right? So the very next thing, or the next thing coming up is going to be like that control flow logic. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and set up our payload outside of all those if statements. So we'll have payloads that we will be sending to the Slack web API, which is really just going to be the channel of the user that we're going to send it to, as well as the message that we're going to be sending. And then we also need to have some authorization headers, which is going to be that token that we have. So we're going to go ahead and knock this out real quick. So payload, we are going to say web payload. How about that? We'll set that up as an empty dictionary for the time being, and then we will have headers, which will be an empty dictionary as well. And then the headers, we need to pass in our authorization. Authorization. And this is going to be a bearer token. Space plus our token up at the top. And then we also need to pass in our content type. Content type, and this is going to be application JSON. Like so. That should be good to go, and then we can actually start working on our logic. So, first things first, we'll say if type equals, so one of the types that will come through as events is app mention. And so app mention is exactly what you think it is. It's somebody mentioned the app in a public channel, right? So at this point, we need to say something to the effect of if secret in text, right here is where we're going to reply in DM, and then if there's not a secret, we will reply in channel, right? So that should be reasonably straightforward. We'll get to that here in a second. And then else if the type is a message, right? In this case, we will reply inside of the DM. And so let's go ahead and do that. So this will be reply DM. And then outside of this, if it's not an app mention and it's not a message, and we don't know what to do with it, we might as well just go ahead and respond in such a way that we acknowledge to Slack that we know it was them and we secured their message, but we don't know what to do with it. And so that's just going to be the return of the challenge. And then outside of R is auth, we return none. We got our indents a little screwed up, I think. Let's go ahead and zap this. Clean that up a little. Oop, nope. Blink, blink, blink. Okay. So, let's go ahead and do some message responding. So in the event, we have an app message and it's a secret. Let's go ahead and give us some logs just so we can track things in the event things go sideways. So should respond in private channel. And so here we'll go ahead and create our web payload. Well, actually, the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and invoke this conversation.open so we can get a channel. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are going to need two URLs here. Eventually, we are going to have a send message URL, and we're going to have an open channel URL. All right. Open channel URL is going to be this one, so we'll go ahead and stick that there. And then send message here, we'll go ahead and stick that there. Blink. All right, and so inside of the secret, we need to go get channel for DM, and we are going to go ahead and just make a quick post call for that. So we are going to say channel response is equal to requests.post. Our URL is going to be, what do we call it? Open channel URL. Open channel URL. And then we're going to need to pass in our headers. Blink. And then we are going to need a payload. So we're just going to say data json.dumps. We're going to take our JSON to a string, and we're going to call this channel payload. All right, and so we need to make a channel payload. Right, and then our channel payload just needs the user ID. So what we can do, I'll walk y'all through this here in a second. So what we're gonna do is go channel payload. We're gonna say users, and for the time being, we're gonna hard code this. Reason being is what we will eventually get is inside of our payload up here, which I believe we print out as part of the auth method. Yeah, request body. The ID of the user that sent that message will be present in that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that ID out of the payload. I don't recall exactly what that payload looks like. So for the time being, we'll hard code it and then we'll correct it. Right? So we'll go ahead and get our channel response after we send that through. And then in our channel response, we are going to have this. So we'll go ahead and grab the channel object and then we'll grab the ID object. So we shall go channel data, I guess. Channel response dot get channel, and then we'll go dm channel ID is equal to channel data dot get, and this will be ID. And then this will be the ID for the DM that we want to make. And so then at this point, we need to create our what's the word I'm looking for? I lost my train of thought. The payload for the API call to actually send a message. So we will call this, I guess, message payload. Right? And so our message payload will need to have a channel. Right, and then this is going to be the DM channel ID, and then we need to go message payload. Also needs some text, right? And so this is going to be our quote secret, if you will, at this point in time. So we should say something to the effect of, I would love to hear a secret, but we should talk in the DMs, right? And then at this point, we need to go ahead and send this REST call. So this is going to be requests.post. This is going to be send message URL. Same headers we use, they just have auth, nothing crazy there. And then data is going to be json.dumps, and then this is going to be the message payload. Right, and so that should realistically be, let's go ahead and make this window a little bigger, shall we? All we need to get that message sent through. So just for debugging, because I'm sure we're gonna have a bug in here somewhere, let's go ahead and print out some logs. So let's go print log channel, say open channel call response code is going to be channel response dot status code, except that's going to be an int, so we need to cast that to a string. And then let's go ahead and actually print the payload just so we know what it is. Payload. We'll say get JSON. Oh, that's interesting. Fine, JSON. Okay, cool. And then we will do the same thing for the actual message. So this will be message call. This is going to be message call. Right, and then this needs to be, oh, we didn't save the payload. So we'll say message response. Boop. Okay, so that should take care of that piece. All right, and then so the other thing we wanted to do, just for notes, we will say to do pull this ID from the payload. We'll come back to that. We'll take care of that a little later. Okay, so else we are going to respawn in the channel. And so what we're going to have here is, actually before we go, let's go ahead and rip out this web payload. We don't need that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and respond in the channel. And to do this, it's largely just going to be this message payload code, right? So we're going to go message payload, right? Message payload, we are going to add in a channel. And in this case, we don't have this channel ID. Now, this channel ID would also be present in the payload that comes through as part of the request. But in this particular case, the bot only lives in one channel. So for this point in time, I'm just going to hard code it. But what we should probably do at some point in time, if this was going to be a real bot, is say pull channel ID from payload, right? Then we'll go message payload. We are going to respond with some text. And here we will say, I heard my name, right? And then we need to go message response equals request dot post. We need a send message URL. We need to pipe in our headers. And then we need to say data is equal to JSON.dumps. And this is going to be message payload. And then we're just going to print out the same things, but we're just going to grab it from here. Blink. And then the other thing we need to do is, so here we printed I should respond in private channel. Here it's going to be should respond. Actually, this should be should respond in DM for secret. And then we'll say here should respond in public channel. And then here, we just need to respond with our DM. Right, so here we shall say, go ahead and make our message payload. Right, message payload. We shall say message payload equal at, we're going to need the text, and we're going to need the channel. So, what we are going to do here is, in this case, we are going to need to pull the ID from the payload. Just because we won't necessarily ever have it or have a way to hard code it, right? So in this case, we said we eventually want to pull the channel from the payload, but okay to hard code. As bot lives in one channel. Here we had to pull the user ID. Here we'll actually need to pull the channel or the direct message channel ID, and we don't have a way to do that right now, but that will be this ID here, right? So for the time being, this is just going to be nonsense, and we'll correct it once we get some payloads and we know what they look like. So here we'll say nonsense, and then here this text will be I love to send messages, and then just to save y'all watching me type, we'll send our message, except I misspelled message payload somewhere along the way, so let's correct that. And then log message, call response code message log payload, cool. And then so let's go ahead and print out a log here. So print on log should respond in same DM message thread. Okay, and so that should get our messages short of pulling IDs from payloads. Get DM thread ID from payload. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of running so we can get some payloads and understand what we have to work with. All right, presto playo. And then so here, oh, sending messages for this app has been turned off. We're gonna need to correct that. So the reason we are seeing that is whenever we created this message under app home, I believe it is, we have not allowed users to send / commands and messages from the message tab. So we go ahead and check that box. We come over here and refresh Slack, and now we can actually send messages. Okay, so let's go to our bot playground. We will test the app mention first. So, first things first, we'll just say, hey, Slack bot tutorial. Send a message, and we should get a bad gateway. That's interesting. Why do we have a bad gateway? That is running on port 4000. Ngrok should be running on port 4000. We shouldn't have got a bad gateway. Let's go ahead and restart our app and try that again. Actually, to prevent, oh, that's interesting. Let's go ahead and come over here and go health check. Make sure our app is running. Okay, so health check worked. Let's go ahead and say, hey, Slackbot tutorial. Not seeing any logs come through on our server. What's going on there? That is very strange. Something that could be going on is perhaps we messed up the event subscription API. Or perhaps we just never saved the event subscription API being enabled. That happens. Let's go ahead and fix that, shall we? All right, so that's verified. So we should be good to go on that note. And then, in a perfect world, this should work. Actually, let's go ahead and save these changes. For whatever reason, I cannot save these changes. We need app mention, and then we need message IM. It looks like I just didn't save this whenever I set this up, so let's go ahead and save that. Success. We'll pull up our server, we'll pull up Slack, and we'll try this again. Hey, Slackbot tutorial. Okay, and we got some logs, and Slackbot tutorial said I heard my name. Perfect. So let's go ahead and pull out the actual data that we need. So in the event, we were just replying to the public channel. All is well and good. We weren't too worried about our hard coding there. But in the event, we are trying to pull our user ID that we do want. That way, if somebody else were to send a message to this bot, it would respond to them and not me. So inside of our request body that we log out, we have a token, a team ID, an API app ID, and an event. Then inside of our event, we have a client message ID, a type is an app mention, and then we have the user. And so if you will see, this user is UDU6PFS1E, that's what we have up here. So we just need to rip that out. So what we can do is we should have our payload already available, and we should also have our event already available. So in theory, we should just be able to go event.get, and then this is inside of the event. We need user, and so we'll call this user ID. This needs to be a string, and then this will now be user ID, and we can zap that to do. Okay, and then so then the other thing we needed is in the event we have a message. There should be, at least I thought there was a channel. App ID, team ID. Maybe that's only in the private messages. Alright, let's reread real quick. We have client message ID, we have type, we have text, we have user, we have timestamp, we have team, we have blocks. Curious. Alright, well. Alright, well, one thing at a time. Let's test these, and then we'll figure out our messaging system. So let's restart our server. Blank. Server should be up. So then if we come over here and we say, hey, Slack bot tutorial, Slack bot should come back and say, heard my name. And then if we say, hey, at Slack bot tutorial, do you want a secret? We should get a private message. Ooh, we got errors. Oh boy, what'd we mess up? Grody. Response object has no attribute get. So, channel response. We need to pull the JSON from the response before we can actually pull. Oh man, I really fouled that up. Channel data.get. All right, so then here we just go response.json.get channel, and that should solve that issue. So let's go ahead and stop that. Press play. Let's just make sure everything is still working as we suspect, right? Heard my name. Hey, at Slack tutorial, do you want a secret? Boink. And good things there. All right, so here we got, I would love to hear secret, but we should talk in the DMs. And if you'll notice over here, we did see that message and we logged out. We don't want to talk to ourselves. So things are working as we would expect. And then here, we need to figure out the channel that we're talking in so we can respond appropriately. So we'll go ahead and send like a dummy message. Let's clear out some space in our logs. Test message for channel. There we go. Okay, so what do we have that we can work with? So we have our request ID, we have our type, we have our text, we have our user, and we have our team. Channel. Perfect, right there. Okay, so then that is going to be, it looks like, you know what? Reading JSON on one line sucks. So let's put this in a parser that's actually somewhat readable. I typically use just like JSON editor. It's an online tool, so don't use this in a professional setting, but if you're doing it for a side project, it works great. Okay, so event, client message. Okay, so the channel is in the event. Beautiful. So then in here, we can do it much the same way as we did up here. So all we got to do is we'll say channel ID is equal to event.getChannel, right? Because we're after that. And then we should be able to take this channel ID and plop it there. And then if we restart our server, our bot should be able to respond to us. Hello, bot. Perfect. And then bot says, I'd love to send messages. And again, we saw that and we said we did not want to talk to ourselves. And so now we have a nice little Slack bot that can respond to mentions in a public channel. It can respond in a way with direct messages. In the event it sees something secretive, right, in a public channel, and then it can respond to DMs. Not just for sake of doing things somewhat better. Let's go ahead and grab this channel ID out from the payload itself. Just because in the event somebody brought this bot to another channel, you would want it to respond as appropriate. And so I would suspect that I can pull the channel ID much the same way as I did in the DMs for the public channel. So let's go ahead and test this and see if this works. Let's go ahead and stop this and restart it, and then we'll go to our bot playground. And then in a perfect world, I should be able to say, hey, Slack bot tutorial, can you hear me? Slack bot should respond, and then I can say, hey, Slack bot tutorial, do you want to hear a secret? Right, it should respond back in the private message, right? And then if I tell it I love to code, we should get back I love to send messages. And there you go. That is a brief introduction into writing Slack bots, right? So just by way of what we did, we created a simple Flask server, we created a health check endpoint, and then we created a consumer. The Slack bot that we configured in the web interface sends us events. First thing we do is we check to see if those messages are secure by computing the hash. And then once they are deemed to be secure, we make sure that we're not just doing an auth check. We make sure we are not talking to ourselves. And then assuming both of those conditions pass, we look for an app mention. If the app mention has secret, we pull a channel for a private message, and then we send the private message. If we don't have a secret mentioned, we just reply in the same channel. And if somebody sends us a DM, we respond with a DM, right? The way we respond is by invoking either the send message API or the open channel API. And then once we send those appropriate REST calls, we respond to the events API with the challenge. And so that is Slackbots 101. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, throw me a like, throw me a subscribe, leave me a comment if it was helpful. And if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, or if I said something horrendously stupid, please let me know in the comments below. I hope you all have a great day, and stay coding.